Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Expat Planet. Today we are diving into a crucial topic for expat families relocating to Madrid, and that's education. I am joined by Sinead Galvin, a Madrid school expert and founder of Steps into Spain, where she helps families find the right schools in Madrid. Madrid offers a variety of schooling options, which can be a little bit confusing in the beginning, but Sinead will guide us through them. Hi, Sinead. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me on your platform. I'm really happy to be here and to speak to you today.
Let's dive into it. What are the different types of schools available in Madrid for expat families?
We have three main types of schools. You've got the state schools, which are called públicos. Then we've got what are called concertados schools, and these are private schools that are partly subsidized by the government and tend to be Catholic. About 98% are Catholic, if not even 99%. And then we've got private schools, and within the private schools, you've got a private Spanish school, a private bilingual school. It could be an international school, which would follow perhaps the British curriculum, the American curriculum, the German curriculum. And then you could also have the Montessori schools or the Waldorf schools would fall into the private school category. In Madrid, probably I would say roundabout figures, about 50% of the population of students, obviously, are in public schools. About another 15% are in private schools, and then the remainder are in concertado schools. The government that we have in Madrid really pushes the concertado schools and seems to favor concertado schools within the city. And in the past, I would few number of years, probably even the last 10 years, any new school that's been built in the city is a concertado school.
Why are they pushing the concentrado schools?
I do not know, Laura. I really don't know. I mean, for a family that wants to go into the public school system, in primary, well, the public schools go from 3 years to 12 years of age. That's the infants in primary. There are a number of those schools. We've got lots of choice. You've got a big selection of primary schools that are public. But when you get to secondary schools, which goes from 7th grade upwards, which is Primero de la ESO upwards, it becomes quite difficult for families if they want to continue in public education. And a lot of families, even though they would prefer to continue in public education, have to go into concertado because they don't have any public secondary schools, institutos, near where they live.
Which are the most popular among the expat families?
You see, if it's a expat family, that's going to move perhaps every 2 years, depending on their job, and they know they'll be in Madrid for 2 years, and then they're going to go on to Singapore or etc. They usually prefer to keep their kids in the same kind of schooling that they've come from. So if they're in a British school in the other country, then they'll continue with the British education here to give the child some continuity. But then for a lot of expat families or international families, when they move here, they want a Spanish immersion. They want their kids to learn Spanish. And for that very reason, they'll choose a public school or a concertado school or perhaps a private Spanish school. Because if you choose international school, children will learn Spanish, but it's from 1st grade upwards, the primero de primaria upwards. And obviously it's a much slower level compared to a child that's having Spanish on a daily basis and has half their day or if not more in learning in Spanish. What I would say a watch out, and most parents are obviously already aware of this, a Spanish immersion is great when kids are very young, but as kids get older, to put a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old into a Spanish school when they've never studied Spanish beforehand, it can be quite a challenge.
It can be quite frustrating, I think.
It can be frustrating
for the child, but also for the parents because
too. Without a doubt.
I had a lot of work helping my son.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because yes, I mean, I think and this is what I always, when I'm working with my clients, you need to be prepared to, not everybody will speak and will say English. Not everybody in the Spanish school will speak English. Hopefully you can be lucky enough that your child's class teacher does speak English, but it's not something that's guaranteed. So you've
in
got
public schools, you mean, or concentrado?
The same. Usually in the public and a concertado school, if it's a bilingual school, and sorry, this isn't something I mentioned earlier, but within the public and concertado schools and the private schools, you've got bilingual or 100% Spanish speaking schools. Usually for international families, they'll go with a bilingual school because at least their child has some parts of the day when they can kind of take a little bit of a rest and it's like, yes, I know what I'm doing here. Whereas with but their class teacher, which is la tutora, might not necessarily be the teacher that's teaching English. So might not speak any English. Might be the teacher that's teaching them Spanish or teaching them math. And it can be challenging. The first few months, say if your child starts in September, doesn't speak any Spanish, the parents don't speak any Spanish. Everybody's obviously learning, but it takes a bit of time. Those first few months can be exhausting and the simplest, most little thing can become it escalates into something very, very big because it's a break, the communication is quite difficult. But usually it's the children that will learn the language quicker, the quickest in the family, and they become the parents' translators.
Yeah, it's the quickest way to learn.
It is the quickest
jump
way.
into the wild waters, and then you don't have any other option just to learn it very fast.
Yeah,
to survive.
and I mean, Madrid is a city. Not everybody speaks English in Madrid. It's perhaps maybe in the south of Spain. If you go to Malaga, you probably go to restaurants and you've got an English version and a Spanish version of the menu, but that doesn't necessarily happen in Madrid. Now, obviously, it's easier. We've got Google Translate and things like that. But yes, but I would always say, and this is something I say, this is even a public school or a private school. I always suggest getting additional Spanish lessons outside of school. I don't, it's usually the school will do as much as they can, but usually your child needs a little bit of, it needs additional support to get to that. Because once they get Spanish language, once they've got that part, then everything else falls into place.
What would you say are the differences between public schools in Madrid and private or international schools?
Okay, let's see. Firstly, there would be language. Say we'll go with the international schools, say a public school or an international school. Obviously, the curriculum in international school could be British or American, whereas the public school is going to follow the Spanish curriculum. That's one of the basic things. Obviously, language as well. Another part, and this is something that is attractive to international families with younger kids. If they choose a public school or a concertado school, they're usually their local neighborhood schools. So it makes it's a little bit easier. It makes life a lot easier in terms of logistics. You've got young kids, their play dates, taking them to the park, things like that, and getting to know other families. It's a lot easier in those types of schools. Whereas what happens with a lot of the international schools is they tend to be a little bit outside of the city. Most are a little bit outside of the city because they've got great facilities, big sports grounds, and they're big, big buildings. Whereas the other schools are smaller and more local, where you kind of get a not nicer, but depending on what each family is looking for, a more close-knit community within the public and concertado schools compared to the international schools. Obviously, another big difference are fees. But I mean, that's obvious.
Yeah. But you also have to pay some small amount in concentrado.
In concentrados,
of course, it can't be compared to the fees of international schools.
I mean, even within private schools, you've got international schools, you've got the Waldorf schools or private Spanish schools. The international schools are the most expensive of all of the schools in Madrid. Out of all of the schools in Madrid, the concertado schools, you will always have to pay a fee. It's called la cuota voluntaria. A voluntary fee. It's not voluntary. You do have to pay that fee. They always say it's voluntary, but it's not. What can be a little bit irritating with the concertado schools is most of these schools, they don't publish their fees on their websites. And they're very slow to tell you their fees until you're actually getting to the point of enrollment, which doesn't seem very fair because if a family wants to work with me, for example, my fees are on my website. If a family wants the international school, the fees are on the website, almost all. Any service, anything that you want, you see the fees, but not with the concertado school. And then the public schools, you don't pay any fees, but you will pay for your school. Well, school books you probably won't. We've got a book scheme, but you'll pay for lunch. Your monthly lunch fees. And as you know, Laura, lunch is a big deal. Lunch usually tends to be a 3-course meal. And for a lot of families, for international families, that can be quite shocking. It can be a bit startling that they might be coming from a country where a child has like a little sandwich or a little snack. And here they come to Spain and it's a 3-course meal at lunchtime.
But it's great.
Oh, it's very good. I mean, obviously you pay for it. but it is very convenient. It makes evening time and dinner times much, much easier for parents. And you get that monthly menu. You can see what your children are having, what they've had at lunchtime, so you can organize your dinner. Or as well, what's also very good is it's a balanced diet. They put a lot of fish, maybe a bit too much meat, but it depends on what each family prefers. But it is convenient.
What are the challenges that expat families face when they are trying to choose a school?
In Madrid, it's simply that there's so many. There are so many schools. It can be quite difficult to think, well, which is the right one. I mean, usually a family will have an idea. Okay, I'm going to choose an international school, or I'm going to go with a public school or a concertado school. The international schools, in a way, are easier because you can access their website, and their website is usually, different languages. You've got an admissions team, and they will show you why their school is so amazing and is the right school for your child. Probably a little bit of the difficulty of that is the international school, or any school, private school, will usually say that it's the right school for your child, and it might not be, because each child is different and each family is looking for something different from a school, and it might not be the same thing that another family is looking for. So it's always good to get an outsider's view or a more objective perspective on the schools. And then if you want to go, say, to the public or concertado schools, the challenge with that is just it comes back to Spanish bureaucracy, and it is the application process for these both types of schools can be extremely difficult to understand, even for families that have been living here for a very, very long time.
Is it easy to get into an international school in Madrid? Because I know that here in Valencia, sometimes it's a challenge because there are no free places.
I've heard that about Valencia, that there's quite long waiting lists. In Madrid, I would say it depends on the school. There are certain schools that definitely are more popular, and they tend to have waiting lists. But it can also depend on the school year, the year group that you're looking for. One of your children might get into one of the year groups, and the other child might not. And for a lot of families, that can be a bit of a pain, because most families prefer that their kids are going to the same school. But really, the schools, it tends to depend on the school. Some schools are a little bit more attractive to some families than others. But all of these schools, they all have admissions tests. And as well, it will depend, well, how well do you do in your admissions test to get into the school?
Yeah, the same here.
I imagine in most of these schools. But we certainly have a lot of international schools here, a huge number.
Also in Madrid,
yeah,
the competition is big.
There is a lot of competition.
What are the average costs associated with private and international schools?
With the concertado schools, a roundabout figure, and again, it depends on the school. It could be up to about €200 per child per month in the quota voluntario, your voluntary fee, plus lunch, which could
Lovely.
It comes up to about €350, €400 per child per month. And obviously, you've got school uniforms and books, etc., with the concertado schools. And then you've got, say, a private Spanish school. Your tuition fees could be between 550 up to about the older kids could be about 800, €900 per month tuition fees, plus your lunch fees. Because in the private,
are these one comparable to the international schools?
No, those are
in the way how they teach? I know, but you pay such a high price. So I'm asking what they offer. What special things they offer?
Usually they tend to offer a different way of teaching. The Spanish schools can sometimes be criticized for being a little bit more old school, and that it's very much teacher-led, a lot of memorizing, a lot of exams, a lot of homework from third grade upwards. Some families that choose a private school, a private Spanish school, are looking for something different to that. They want something different. And obviously, if you want something different, well, not obviously, but if you want something different to what's the typical public and concertado school, you've got to pay for those schools. The results.
So they offer some different kind of methodology,
exactly.
Something more
a different methodology,
more modern,
more hands-on, more active learning, more project work. There's different reasons, but at the end of the day, academically, I think the results are the exact same. It's just more that you want a different learning experience for your children.
Yes, with a different methodology at the end, with the project work, with those modern ways of teaching, I think they will learn more, because they will learn how to present, how to give a presentation, how to express opinions. Obviously, a different way of learning and teaching, and the kids are more prepared to life or for life
work
and
or
for university.
I do think there's something that's important. There are some excellent public schools and there's some excellent concertado schools in Madrid that teach in a different way, that they're more hands-on learning. But what's the problem with these schools is that they're oversubscribed. It's almost impossible to get into these particular schools within the public and concertado school system. It's very difficult to get into the very popular ones. Another reason why a family might choose to go the Spanish private route is religion. You know, some of the very religious schools are the Spanish private schools. Not all, but some. Differences between the Spanish private school and the international school is it really comes down to language. You know, let's focus on the English-speaking international schools, because obviously there's the French, the lycée, there's the German. But one of those things is language. It's all taught in English in an international school.
So what's the difference between a private Spanish school and an international school?
Great question, Laura. And this is something that comes up again and again and again, because it's not so much even a private Spanish school, but I say a bilingual private Spanish school versus an international school. For me, an international school has maybe 4 or 5 certain specific things, and it has to tick each of these boxes to be an international school. I'm focusing only on, say, British and American in this sense. Language, it teaches all the subjects in English, except obviously Spanish language class. As a certain number, I think it's an hour a day that they'll teach in Spanish to comply with all of the regulations as an international school. The second would be that it offers international qualifications, as in international recognized. The IGCSEs or A-levels in the case of UK schools, British schools, and the American school will be high school diploma, APs, or you've got the IB schools, the IB diploma. It should include diverse student body and a diverse teaching body. And what you find a lot of the schools here, and it happens time and time again, these international schools are very popular with Spanish families. But the more diverse it is, I think the more authentic it is as an international school. And it should also participate in international programs like the United Nations programs for students, or the Duke of Edinburgh. And last but not least, and this is just 5 tops. These are my mains. There are a lot more that I would like to include. But it should also offer assistance to kids that move to the school that don't speak the language, that don't speak English as their first language. They don't speak Spanish. So the school has to help these kids to adapt to a new school in a new country, in a new continent, etc., etc. What happens in Madrid, and I'm not sure if this is specific to Madrid, a lot of schools include international in the name of the school. So when a family is doing a simple Google search, they see these different schools that are called international schools. And they think, wow, this is great. And they're a lot cheaper than the other international schools. So it's like, oh, wow, this is great. And then what happens with some of these schools, they have zero experience with kids that are not from that country, that don't speak the language. They offer a lot of hours of English, but then they move into secondary, which is 7th grade upwards, primero de la ESO. And English is almost removed from the curriculum completely. And they only offer, not only, but they offer Spanish exams, which is the Spanish baccalaureate at the end. That's not an international school, in my opinion. It sells itself as an international school, but I think it ends up not working out for the family that's looking for the international school. So I would say when families are looking for international schools, look very, very carefully at the website. What is it that they offer as the kids get older, and ask a lot of these questions when they're going to when they're visiting the school. Or if not, obviously, contact me at Steps into Spain. But it can be very confusing. It's a little bit deceptive, I think.
What are extracurricular activities commonly offered at public schools and international schools?
I mean, they can be actually be quite similar. The activities that are offered at
Hmm.
these schools, perhaps in the international schools, they'll have better facilities to accommodate the activities. But I mean, modern dance, flamenco, robotics, coding, football, basketball, volleyball. We can a lot of the typical activities that are offered at the
In
schools.
public schools too?
In public schools too. Usually the public schools, they're not managed directly by the school. They're managed by the Parents Association, ELAMPA. And they'll send out the different activities that are possible at the beginning of the year in September. And the families will sign up. And then depending on which of the activities that have the most kids, those will be the activities that will take place during the year. What I would say though is if a child is incredibly talented in music or is incredibly talented at football or basketball, and this applies to all of the schools, public or private, they tend to join either local football clubs near their house or they go to a music academy near their house within their neighborhood. Most of the schools, the activities that they offer after school, they're playful, and it's also convenient to the parents that they stay a little bit longer at school. But if your child is very, very, interested and very serious about this particular activity, most families will look for something outside of the school.
What about the prices? Are they affordable?
It depends, I mean, the sky's the limit. Not that sky's the limit, but that really, it depends on the family. A lot of families won't participate in the after school activities.
Hmm.
And some families will sign their child up to every single activity, Monday to Friday. Usually the prices could be maybe for once a week could be €50 up to €200, but €200 might be that they go twice a week. It really
Hmm.
depends.
What is the process for enrolling children in schools in Madrid?
On the type of school. So if you go with the public or the concertado school, the application process is the exact same. You apply. Usual application process is in April, el proceso ordinario, and that's based on a point system. You can apply online, and it's based on a point system. For having siblings at the school, your parents are teaching at the school, for getting benefits from the government. Each has a different number of points, and you try and get as many points as you can, and that will move you up on the list to get a place into the school in September. And then if you miss that deadline, if you're not here in April, because you have to be living here in order to apply, if you miss that in April, then you've got to do it either in July or September. There are fixed dates, there are fixed requirements, and it's always the same. It doesn't change. Private schools, one of the advantages of a private school is that you can apply at any point, any time throughout the year, and you can apply from your own country. You don't have to be in Spain in order to apply. You don't have to be living in Madrid in order to apply. Usually there's admissions tests. They'll have online interviews, but with the parents, with the child, there'll be admissions tests. And then if it all goes well, all of those steps go well, then your child can already be enrolled before you move here to Madrid. Whereas with the other two options, with public and concertada schools, you've got to be living here.
Do the schools accommodate in some way expat children who can't speak the language?
Kids that don't speak Spanish, depending on how old the children are, like I mentioned earlier, if the kids are in infants or say first to fourth grade, the school can manage it roughly, but it can be a challenge as well. They don't usually, say public and concertada schools, they don't usually offer, they don't offer additional Spanish classes, Spanish as a second language or a Spanish immersion program. What they might do, and what they usually do, is that child will be taken out with the other kids that maybe have some learning challenges, and they will have more one-on-one support, but within a smaller group with the teacher. But whereas the private schools, they do offer Spanish as a second language. There are additional Spanish classes. Again, that comes at an additional additional fee for that within the schools. But what the government of Madrid, I don't know if this is specific to Madrid, we've got something, it's called Aula Enlace. And Aula Enlace is a program specific for kids that are moving to Madrid that don't speak Spanish. And the idea is that they will learn Spanish for that, say, for the school year. It's offered mainly in concertado schools, and it applies for kids aged from third grade, which is about 9 years of age, up until cuarto de la ESO, which is about 16 years of age. And they apply to get into Aula de Enlace, which is just a Spanish learning program for that 9 or 10 months. And then the idea would be that the next year that they can join their mainstream classroom and they will have mastered Spanish language. It can be quite difficult to get into these programs, though. There are more kids than there are places, unfortunately.
What about children who have some special educational needs?
Oh, this can be a very, very, very big challenge and something I've lived many, many, many times with lots of my clients. The big challenge with children with special educational needs is if they require English only education. Because unfortunately, a lot of the international schools are not inclusive, regardless of what they say on their website. And I know this from experience, direct experience with the schools and these children. It can be very difficult to find a school that will offer the support that your child needs in Madrid, an international school. It becomes a lot easier if your child speaks Spanish. And if they speak Spanish, then the public schools are excellent. The public schools, and within Madrid, we've got different schools. They're mainstream public schools that have additional support for kids with different special educational needs. They're called centro preferentes. And there might be a centro preferente for children with autism. There might be a centro preferente for children with mobility challenges. But again, the issue with this is there aren't enough places. There aren't enough places in these schools for children with special educational needs, so it can be quite difficult to get into. But of course, if a child doesn't speak Spanish, then really your only alternative is an international school, and that can be, there are 1 or 2 schools in Madrid that are more supportive and more inclusive, but that's kind of about it. It's a challenge.
Thank you very much for your insights. And if you are planning to move to Madrid, reach out to Sinead. Tell us, where can people find you?
Good for closing this off, because otherwise I could waffle on and I could go on and on and on for hours about schools in Madrid. You can find me at the website. My website is www.stepsintospain.es. I'd love to hear from you.
Great. And if you liked our conversation, please subscribe and support us.